I think this is my fourth year preparing and sharing the Easter message here at UUCSR. And I can tell you, it doesn't get any easier. In past years, I've likened it to walking a tightrope strung between the top floors of two skyscrapers and working without a net. And for reasons which will shortly become apparent, I truly think I'm walking the razor's edge this morning. I am a follower of the way of Jesus. I was born into, raised, and lived a great deal of my adult life in mainstream Christianity. But my understanding, my experience, and my expression of Christianity has changed radically. For the majority of practicing Christians, there is no Christianity without the resurrection of Jesus. People have deep faith around this. It brings them peace and hope, and it gets them through very, very hard times in their life. And I honor their faith. I've even envied it sometimes. But for me, it's not the resurrection that is what defines Christianity. It's the teachings of Jesus, the message. It is the person of Jesus, his way of being. He lived what he taught, and he lived in love. For Jesus, love was a verb. I'm going to invite you on a journey this morning. In the next few minutes, just for the next few minutes, I invite you to suspend your disbelief. Open your minds and your hearts as broadly as possible. And for just a little while, move judgment and doubt from the front burner of your mind to the back burner. And replace it with what I am calling I don't know mind. As I said in my welcome, stories do not have to be factual in order to contain deep meaning, deeper truths. And even if one dismisses the resurrection, we cannot simply dismiss all the biblical New Testament accounts of Jesus' life as meaningless. And some of it is factual. Thanks to the written record of Roman and Jewish historians of his time, we know that Jesus lived. We know that he went around the country preaching. We know that he upset both the religious leadership of his time and he upset the Romans. We know he was crucified for the crime of sedition, which are crimes against the state. Now, any more detailed events of Jesus' life, though not verifiable, and despite millennia of distortion and manipulation, nonetheless contain profound wisdom. Jesus in these scripture accounts is a complex human being. He is both a social and political revolutionary, and he is an enlightened mystic. Jesus says in these scriptures that there is a transcendent divine source that empowers all that he does, all that he says. And he depends completely on this source. Now, this is extraordinary to people even in Jesus' time. And in our own time, things like the miracles of healing are considered the stuff of fairy tales by many people. Jesus calls this source of love God. But this ultimate source, this transcendent spirit, this consciousness has many names. Brahman, Atman, the Tao, transcendent spirit of life, the interdependent web of all existence. Most importantly, Jesus says very clearly that everything he does, we can do. He says very clearly that this access to ultimate source, every living person has access to. Now, unfortunately, the deepest tragedy of Christianity is that this has been obscured. And Christianity evolved into making Jesus the only way to access the source. And Jesus is accessing the same thing that Eastern tradition masters did long before him, during his time, and after him. But all religious traditions aside, ordinary people right here and right now are recognizing their connection to this source, and they are recognizing their oneness with it. Let's go back for a minute to the Easter event. Christian scriptures tell us that after his death, Jesus is experienced by a few people. They see him, he talks to them, they hear him. Scripture says he appeared to them. And in other parts of the Bible, the word appearance refers to an apparition, a spirit, a kind of spiritual vision. It is not about a flesh and blood body. A few years ago, here at UUCSR, I offered a gathering for congregants who wanted to come together in a safe place and talk about mysticism, and specifically about any personal mystic experiences they had. As you can imagine, it takes great vulnerability to talk about things like this. And I didn't know if anybody was going to show up. But about 10 people did come. And we went around the room and we shared what would be considered paranormal experiences that had happened to us, that none of us could explain as possible, but all of us received as absolutely, completely real. I was struck by the number of people who shared their experience of having seen and heard loved ones who were deceased. So in light of hearing the experience of people in our own congregation, a faith community where reason looms large, I'm drawn back into the events of Christian scripture that tell us about the days following Jesus' death. Did Jesus, who is truly good and dead, actually appear to people? I don't know. But what I do know is what I heard and what I felt in that boardroom of people from this congregation. And I absolutely accept it as real. Even in early Christianity, the resurrection of Jesus only serves as a vehicle to get us to an ultimate goal. It gets us to awareness and realization of everlasting life. That's a tough one. Well, this begs the question, how is it that people can experience the presence of deceased loved ones now? Is there some form of consciousness that survives physical death? Now, this falls squarely in the realm of spirituality, right? Or does it? Emergency room psychiatrist Dr. Bruce Grayson, his interest in near-death experiences, or NDEs as they're called, began just a few months after graduating from medical school, when he went into a patient's room for the first time, and the patient was comatose. He left the room, and the next morning, when he went in to see her, a young woman, she was wide awake, and he was surprised by that. But he was stunned to hear what she told him. He said, I don't think you have met me, because she said, I've met you, I know who you are. He says, I don't think you have. And she said, of course I have. You were wandering around the halls. You went here, you went there, you went to the cafeteria, and then you had a conversation with my girlfriend, and this is what you said. And this conversation happened in the waiting room, not in the emergency room, not in the room of the patient. And she says this to him quite matter-of-factly. That event and other seemingly impossible stories that he subsequently heard from patients much closer to death than they were to life, challenged his beliefs about the mind and the brain, and ultimately led him on a journey to scientific study of near-death experiences. And that led to the publication of over 100 papers on near-death experiences, NDEs, in peer-reviewed medical journals. Through his research, he discovered common and universal themes in these experiences that go way beyond neurophysiological or cultural interpretations, as well as patterns of consistent after effects when the people woke up and continued with their lives. So this research raises questions, like whether the mind operates independently of the brain. And of course, the big question, is there a continuation of consciousness after physical death? One need not be near death to have experiences of expanded consciousness. There's growing evidence that large numbers of people experience what is called spontaneous mystic experiences, ordinary people. And this is happening to far more people than we think. Our chalice lighting this morning it was a reading from St. John of the Cross, who lived almost 500 years ago. And it's an account of his mystic experience. And that account is uncannily similar to experiences that people report today. This is what he says. I entered into unknowing, yet when I saw myself there, without knowing where I was, I understood great things. I shall not say what I felt, for I remained in unknowing, transcending all knowledge. That perfect knowledge was of peace and holiness. What is going on here? Could it be that big C consciousness is simply always present? Could it be that the brain, far from the creator of consciousness, is merely just the temporary receptacle of consciousness? What we call paranormal experiences aren't limited to near-death experiences. They're not limited to spontaneous, mystical experiences. Let's consider research, a lot of research now, on severely autistic, non-speaking children and young adults who seem to have the ability to communicate with each other telepathically. How about people who are able to heal people energetically? What are the consciousness of animals? What are the consciousness of our pets? I don't know if I have a soul, but I know my dogs did. What happens after we die? I don't know. But ever-increasing numbers of studies on people who have had near-death experiences are resulting in some mind-blowing questions. Can severely autistic, non-speaking children communicate with each other telegraphically across thousands of miles? I don't know. But I'm currently listening to recordings of the scientific experiments themselves as they are being run with these children. And I gotta tell you, it's pretty darn convincing. Can people heal other people energetically? Well, I don't know about other people, but I know I have been greatly healed and helped by energetic healing. Do ordinary people have spontaneous, mystic experiences of greater consciousness that forever change them? This one I know, because I had such an experience. But what if I hadn't? Would I be open to that? I don't know. Contrary to being the creator of consciousness, might the brain just receive consciousness for a little while? The scientific credo is to keep an open mind and remain agnostic when evidence is indecisive. In other words, they don't know. but they will continue to explore. As so many religious traditions for thousands of years have told us, the first steps to enlightenment, the first step is to empty yourself, to release attachment to absolutes. Can we imagine how infinitely richer and more peaceful and more loving our individual and collective lives in this current reality would be if we had the mind of Jesus? If we could draw on this unnameable source that Jesus calls God? Can we imagine how we could transform our hate and fear-fueled country if instead of just espousing the interdependent web of all existence, we could truly experience it? Perhaps wisdom begins with knowing what we don't know. And perhaps that's where the path to true awareness, true knowing begins.